Staniscuaski. She's a biologist by training with a PhD in molecular biology and biotechnology. And she currently holds an associate professor position at Universidade Federal do Rio Grande do Sul. She founded the Parent Science Movement, aimed at supporting researchers in the challenging conciliation of motherhood and academia, as well as promoting public policies to increase the participation and retention of women and in STEM. So let's everyone welcome Professor Fernanda Staniscuaski.
Hello, everyone. So thank you, Natalia, for the invitation. It's quite a pleasure to participate. I will apologize in advance because I got sick over the weekend, so it's been a little hard to speak, but I'll try. So it's very, very interesting to be discussing this issue with you. So we'll be talking about diversity in science from the perspective of gender and parenthood. That is the topic I've been working for the last few years. So if you have any question, please feel free to interrupt me, or if you want to discuss in the end, that is fine too. So I'm not sure if you have had this discussion before in any topic during the course, but the first thing I want to talk about is what's the problem we have when we are talking about diversity. And the main issue we have is that both the academia and science, not just here in Brazil, but everywhere, it's really far from diverse environments. I've started working with this issue around 2016. And in 2017, the Elsevier have released a report saying that in Brazil, almost 50% of the publishers, the authors of scientific papers were women. So immediately people will start saying that, oh, we no longer have an issue, have a lot of women participating in science and everything. And I always like to show some images because we are really far from being an equal and diverse environment. So the picture you are looking at, it's a ceremony on my university here on URGS, where they were celebrating the members of the Brazilian Academy of Science. And you can look at the picture and you see there is almost no women in there. There are only 3 women. There are members of the Brazilian Academy of Science. They are from my university. And if you look at the picture, you also see that there is no Black person. So we are far from being, I'm so sorry, done with the issue of diversity in science. And why are we worried about diversity in science? Why should we be discussing this issue and trying to solve the problem we have? And the thing is, there is no longer doubt that diversity means excellence in science. So there are a lot of studies showing that diverse groups, they are more prone to innovation. So I really like this particular study that was published in PNAS in 2020, and they analyzed over 1 million PhD theses from the US over the period of almost 40 years. And what they have seen is that underrepresented groups, both by gender or race, they are more likely to produce scientific innovation. So if we want excellence, if we want innovation, we should be discussing diversity. And that is because having people from different backgrounds, from different gender, different races, different social economical status, this will open up different perspectives. And when we are trying to solve an issue, and that's what we do in science, diverse groups will have probably original approach to this problem, and we will be more likely to solve this issue. So that's why we should be discussing diversity and really should be worried about not doing anything regarding solving this issue. Diversity is a really broad subject, and what I will be discussing with you today is something that I'm working for the last few years, and I can talk a little bit more in depth. So I'll be talking about gender diversity and also about parenthood. And the thing is, I'm pretty sure you haven't seen this graphic before, It is referred internationally as the leak pipeline, and it's the representation of how is the participation of women in science worldwide. So in the whole world, women represent more than 50% of the bachelor's degrees that were received. But when we go along and look at PhDs, this number decreases to 43%. And when we look at researchers, the last number we have from the whole world is that less than 30% of the scientists are female. So that is a big issue because we are losing these women when we go along in their academic career. So this is the world scenario, and in Brazil is not different. We have exactly the same issue. You may have heard the term Caesar effect, and it's the same thing that is observed worldwide. We observe here in Brazil. So we have now in Brazil, 57% of the undergrad students, they are women, and over 50% of the grad students are women. When we move along the academic career, we start seeing the same effect. We are losing these women. We have now 42% of the professor at graduate courses are women. And when we enter political spaces within academia, we see a really drastic cut. So for now, for example, only now, over 100 years after the foundation of the Brazilian Academy of Science, we have the first female president of the Brazilian Academy of Science. And we have never had a female minister of science and technology. So it's quite drastic what happens. And we need to understand what's the problem, why we are losing these women when we go along in the career to try to solve this issue. And the main problem we have is that this is not a consequence of a single factor. It's not just parenthood that I'll be talking to you. That is the reason we have this scenario in Brazil. There are a lot of factors that influence the participation of women in science. I'll be talking a little bit about all of them, but I'll focus on parenthood because that's what we do in the parenting science movement. So the main causes of the gender inequality we have in science, they come from stereotypes and gender bias, harassment, and also the difficult imbalance in our personal lives with parenthood and care in general, not only for our children. So about gender stereotypes, I just want to bring some data to have something we can discuss later. We still live in a society that defines gender roles. So we have gender stereotypes about intellectual ability, and these gender stereotypes, they are built really early into our children, and that of course will influence how they enter the labor market and how they choose a career and everything. So I really like this paper. It was published in Science in 2017. So they gathered kids from 6 to 7 years old, and they described a really brilliant person, saying that he was very smart, very intelligent, and everything. And they asked these children to say if that person was a man or a woman. And at age 5, kids tended to respond the same gender, their own gender. So girls will say that their really smart person was a woman, and boys will say that really smart person was a man. But at 6 and 7 years, that changes. So boys still say that a really smart person is a man, but girls start saying that a really smart person is also a man. So there is something that happens really early with our kids. They start to put this image that brilliance, intelligence, they are qualities for men. This same work, when they describe a really, really devoted person, they see girls going to that really dedicated role, and boys is still going to the toys they are designed to smart people. So we have this happening really early. So we need to be really careful when we are talking about gender stereotypes, because that will most likely influence how these young girls will see what they can do when they become older and trying to find out try to pick up a career and everything. We have some data from Latin America. So this study has looked at São Paulo, Buenos Aires, and Mexico City. And the same thing happens. They have 90% of the girls from 8 to 6 years old saying that engineering, it's a boy thing. So it's quite drastic what happens. And that is one of the reasons we still have a really low representation of women when we're looking at engineer, math, and almost all of the STEM fields. The other thing regarding gender stereotypes is because from our birth, we have been told that men and women are different, that men are more smart and everything. That also have an impact and how we evaluate people. So this paper from 2012, it's very interesting. They have done an application for a job as a lab manager. And they send out this application, the same CV, but they changed the name. It was John or Joanne. And they sent out this application. And it was quite drastic what they saw, because both men and women, they were evaluating the CVs. They said that John was more competent and more likely to be hired than Joanne. And remember, it was exactly the same CV. And they also offer a salary that was like 4 times higher for John than for Joanne. So we tend to reproduce this bias, even if it's unconscious. We are not consciously saying, oh no, this woman is not capable of doing this job, but we still have this unconscious bias that will reflect on our attitudes, including how we evaluate people. And that has been studied a lot in science, showing how bias affects the publication rates. So there is this paper showing that when we use double blind, so the reviewer do not know who the author of the paper is, you see a change on the rate of papers that were accepted for publication. This was done for the ecology field, but we have papers describing the same effect in journals from different areas. So it is quite drastic, the effect of just knowing the name of the person and assuming that it is a female researcher, and then having this drastic effect on papers being accepted for publication. And also, the kind of review you receive being a woman or being, or being a man is quite different. So this paper is also very interesting. I can send the link afterwards. And they have analyzed how reviewers wrote the review about a particular paper when the authors were mostly or mainly female or male. And I just brought one of the comments they have evaluated in this paper, that the reviewer said that despite the PI being a woman, she was trained by several leading men in the field and was likely to be able to conduct the proposed research. So again, we are seeing that just by the gender of the research, the researcher, the evaluation that she's receiving is quite drastic. It's quite rushed. So we cannot forget that this is a big issue when we are talking about women entering and staying, progressing in the academic career. The other thing we need to talk about is harassment. Our university most likely are not open to talk about it, but it is an issue. And we have now some data showing how big the problem is here in Brazil and in the whole world. So here in my university at URGS, one of the groups from the physics department have conducted an essay, a study regarding harassment in university, and they have collected testimonial from students. And I brought some of the examples of what these students reported to have heard, both from their professors, from their peers, from everybody in the university. So it's really drastic for a woman, this kind of comments, because you don't want to be in this environment. You are constantly being told you're not supposed to be here because you're not smart enough, or because a lot of the things we heard. So it is a big issue, and we want to tackle the issue of women leaving academia and science, we need to address harassment because that is a really big issue. So the same group from the physics department here at the university, they have conducted a survey, and they have shown that both moral and sexual harassment, it happens within the university. And there is a lot of difference when we look at the numbers, considering male students, staff, and professors, and female students, staff, and professors. You will see that both for moral and sexual harassment, women reported a higher rate. So there is a larger impact of harassment for women within the universities, and we need to address this issue. And it's not only here in Brazil. So there is this study that I was doing with people that goes to field trips, and it was from, this data is from 30 different countries, from life and geosciences. And you see that, again, harassment is quite common in these situations of field work. But again, we see a major difference between men and women, especially when we are talking about assault, we're talking about sexual harassment. So it is a quite broad problem. It's not a particular university or only here in Brazil, it's everywhere. And we need to address this issue if we want to change the participation of women in science. And the last thing I can talk to you about with more property, it's about parenthood and care in general. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about the parenting science movement, how we created the movement, and what we have done for this last 6 years since we founded the movement. So just to introduce to yourself who we are, we started the movement in 2016. And at that point, we were 7 scientists, mostly from the south of Brazil, from my university. They were people close to me. And over the years, we have expanded a lot. Today, the parenting science movement is composed by 90 scientists from all over Brazil. We are organized in pods. So we have the central pod, that is this group that is on the picture here, that coordinate the movement with me. And we have 5 regional pods with our investors, and I will talk a little bit more about it later. So why do we need to discuss parenthood and science? And I really like this paper that was published in 2019 in PNAS. And they have looked at the career from people in the US and Canada. And what they have seen is that becoming a parent changes the trajectory of the careers from both men and women. But it was really different, the effect they observed. So when they look at parents, male parents, fathers, around 23% of the fathers have changed careers, going to part-time works or even leaving science after becoming a parent. But for mothers, this number is 43%. So 43% of the newly mothers, they've decided to leave science or go to part-time jobs and everything. So it's quite drastic that when we become a parent, we will see this impact, and it is quite different between men and women. So that's the reason we'll be mostly talking about mothers today, even though our movement, the name is Parenting Science, and the name was kept in English because we didn't want to talk about just mothers or just fathers, and in Portuguese, you know, everything is gendered. So we left the name in English because we want to talk about parents in general. But we know that we still live in a society that who take care of children, it's the mother. So that's why we mostly be focusing on mothers. And we have data that support this kind of action towards mothers. So this paper, again, was from data from the US and Canada, and they have shown that comparing women and men that just have children with their childless peers, they have a huge impact on publication rates on the first years after the child was born. And they have done the analysis for several different knowledge areas. And I brought some of the results here. Because, for instance, in computer science, women in the first years after the child was born, they they tended to publish 17 less papers, 17 less percent less papers than their female childless peers. Men in the computer science, they did not have any impact. In business, women again suffer a huge drop on the publication rates, and men increased their publication rates when compared to childless men. And history was the only field that they saw that men also had an impact on publication rates after having children. But again, it's not even compared to what happens to women, because in this field, women will publish half what the childless female scientists will be publishing, and then there is a drop of around 17%. So we have a lot of data showing that there is an impact when you become a parent, but the impact is way worse for mothers, and that's why we'll be talking about it. So I just want to bring one issue, because it's not just caring for children, it's not just mothers that suffer the impact because of social roles we have in our society. So in all sectors, including academia and science, women are the ones responsible for caring, and not just for children, and caring for all elderly people, people with disabilities, caring for home. We have data here in Brazil showing that women spend almost 70% more hours taking care of home, domestic labor, than men. So there is a heavier burden and on women than in men. And these family obligations, taking care of children, elderly people, taking care of home, they can slow down and even provoke breaks on the careers of women. And the problem we have is that our academic system, our scientific system, not only in Brazil, but everywhere, there is no room for breaks. If you stop your career for a while, it will be really, really hard to resume your career after. So, and that is because we have this really rigid model of what is an ideal career pathway. So we go from one step to the other. We go from undergrad to graduate student, a postdoc, and then a permanent position at a university. If you have any deviation or any stops along the way, you are this is seen as a reflection of lack of determination, lack of commitment, and lack of enthusiasm. And we know that is not the case, but that is how the system is built. So this expected linear career path, it has a really high toll on diversity, especially when we're talking about women in science. And we need to address that. We need to change that, because this culture we have in research right now, for me, is one of the main things we are making people give up on a scientific career. I just want to bring one data that is quite representative of how we see an ideal career and how they can be, this vision can be really hard for women. So this paper was published during the pandemic, and they were evaluating how the pandemic was affecting time spent for the scientists before and after the pandemic. So what I want to discuss is not the pandemic effect, but the results they got from the data pre the pandemic. So you'll see that most of the scientists, they will say they work over 60 hours a week. Really, like 10% said they work 80 hours a week. So we normalize this kind of dedication and everything. And for someone that has to take care of anyone or has any other aspect of their lives impacting this time that they are supposed to be dedicating to science, it's unattainable to progress or even enter in this career. So this kind of commitment we are demanding from people in science often will lead women to abandon the career or not even entering the system, because they will perceive that something that cannot attend, they cannot do it because they have other parts of their life that require attention. So this data for me is quite illustrative about how we need to change how we do science if we want to address the issue of women in science and diversity in science. So how will we be able to resolve this issue? The first thing, we need to raise awareness. If we are not aware of the problem, we are not going to solve it. So a very clear example of how much we still need to talk about it. So over the weekend, we have published in the the social media, from the Parenting Science social media, some data from the productive fellowships from CNPq. They have released the result Friday. And we are saying, oh, okay, so we still have a lack of representation of women in these fellowships because it's only 36% of the fellowships that were awarded to women. And people, oh, that is not, cannot be happening. What happened this year? This is the issue. This issue is happening for at least 2 decades. This number, this 36%, is the same one we have from 2005. So people will seem surprised with the result. So we really need to be constantly discussing about it because people still don't see it as a problem. And okay, we will raise awareness about it, but how can we actually solve the issue? First of all, we need legislation. We need support policies and affirmative actions. They are designed for diversity and in our case, toward mothers, so we can help them to enter, stay, and progress in the academic career. And that has to be a joint effort. It is not going to change anything if only mothers will be discussing parenthood, if only Black people will discuss race and everything. We need the entire academic and scientific community engaged in this conversation and in actions towards solving this problem. And that's how we are trying to contribute with the parenting science movement. We are trying to change how parenthood, more specifically motherhood, is perceived within academia. So we will have a more equitable, fair, and diverse environment in science. And we are trying to promote the discussion about the impacts of motherhood in academic career, but also generating data to develop any kind of support policies aimed at scientist mothers. And one main thing we need to discuss when we are talking about gender and parenthood is that there are a lot of intersections with this subject. We cannot talk about gender, especially here in Brazil, without talking about race. So the numbers I showed in the beginning, the Caesar factor you see with the 42% of graduate program professors being women, we are talking about women in general. If we look at the data for Black women, the number drops to 3%. Only 3% of the PhD advisors in Brazil are Black females. So we cannot discuss gender and parenthood without addressing also the question of race. So that's how we are trying to contribute to raise awareness and then try to solve or at least help solve the issue of diversity here in Brazil. So we are trying to raise awareness, we are trying to generate data to actually analyze the problem. So with this data, together with the theoretical references that are already available to design support policies, we need to discuss bias and prejudices that are really common around mothers in academia, because when you become a mother, we will have your ability, your commitment, your devotion to science questioned daily. So we need to fight that too. And in the end, we need a strong network to be able to promote change. And I'll try to tell you a little bit how we are trying to fulfill these goals with the parenting science movement. So about awareness. Since 2019, we have been doing here in Brazil, the Symposium on Motherhood and Science. These symposia are really important moments for us because it's when we can gather everyone and discuss what's happening, what has been done, if everything is, I'm so sorry, if everything is going where we want and so on. So the first symposium we had in 2018, and for sure was a landmark in our movement, because it was the first time we were able to organize our demands. What has to be done so we can see a change in the near future when we're talking about women in science, and more specifically about mothers in science. So we organized a lot of demands at that point, and it's really impressive for us how quickly some of those demands were attended. Because if you see my talks from 2017, I will be saying that, oh, the changes is for the next generation, but the changes are actually happening right now. So we are really glad with that. So the first thing we saw as a huge demand was the breaks that we have in our CVs. They had to be accounted for. If you look at my CV, I haven't published a paper in 2015 and 16, and that gap in my career, in my CV, has really impacted my career when we were talking about gain grants, having fellowships, and everything. So we needed these gaps to be acknowledged. So like in 2018, we started in motherhood in Lattice campaigns, the maternity in Lattice campaign. So we'll see a lot of people wearing our shirts with the kids, our kids' names on. And with the data we had at the time, we wrote a letter to CNPq, the agency that runs the Lattice platform. This letter was signed by 34 scientific societies in Brazil, including Brazilian Academy of Science. So we delivered this letter to CNPq in 2018, July of 2018. And after 3 years of discussions and meetings and everything, in April of 2021, CNPq has updated the Lattice platform, and they have included a leave field. And within this field, you can have your maternity leave information added on. So it was really a really massive accomplishment for us, not just because we had a demand attended by CNPq, but also because we took motherhood out of invisibility. It was quite common for people to say, oh, it's your personal life. We don't want to talk about it. There is no influence of your personal life in your professional life. And that is not true. My motherhood is part of my career, as for most of the women that become mothers. So it is really important that we can show these periods we were away from work because of our maternity leaves. But most of all, with this information, together with the data we gather, showing that for women, when you become a mother, there is a drop in publication rates here in Brazil, as it was seen in other countries, we were able to have changes within our universities and our funding agencies. So today, there are a lot of support policies that have been implemented in universities and in the funding agencies. They will consider these gaps we have in our CVs when they are analyzing CVs for any kind of processes. We're talking about hiring processes, grant applications, fellowship applications, student selection in graduate programs, professors selections in graduate programs, and everything. So we have a lot of examples of these support policies that have been developed based on our data. You can look at our website. There is this paper on there, and it is really, really positive that this change have been implemented. The problem we still have is that is not an institutional change. So we have one call from CNPq that will include motherhood. We have one call from the FAPs, the funding agencies from the states, one graduate program that will have rules for maternity and when they are selecting students, everything. So we need this change to be institutionalized. And that is the main issue we still have regarding support policies. I just want to address really quickly the pandemic, because we cannot discuss the impact of the pandemic in the academic career without addressing gender and parenthood. So we have conducted a survey in 2020 when we were in the beginning of the social isolation period. And the effects we saw was quite drastic. So we had, the survey was answered for almost 15,000 researchers from all the from our Brazil regions, and they were grad students, postdocs, and professors. And in all the cases, we saw there is a gender effects. Women they were being more impacted by the pandemic regarding publication rates, keeping up with their thesis and dissertations. They were more impacted than men. There was a parenthood effect. So mothers and even fathers were more affected than their childless peers. And there are also a really huge impact of race. Black women, regardless of being mothers or not, they were the groups that were suffering the hardest hit in their productivity. And that is because during this period we were analyzing with the social isolation, the ones that were able to keep up with their works, publication rates, and everything, it was the scientists with huge networks, professional networks. And we know they're women, they suffer isolation in academia, they have smaller networks. And Black women, for these women, the networks are even smaller. So the pandemic has a drastic impact for everyone, but in academia, there is a gender, a parenthood, and a race effect that we need to take care of when we're talking about fighting the setbacks that the pandemic brought for the academic career. So we have discussed plenty of these impacts and what we should be doing. So I brought here some of the papers we have published. You can access them. But the thing is, we are not doing enough, because the impacts, especially in publication rates, we will start seeing now, because during 2020, 2021, we will still be publishing what we have produced in 2019, 2020. So right now, we are going to start seeing a huge impact of the pandemic in the publication rates for female scientists, and that will go on for a really long period of time. So we need to be doing something. And unfortunately, our universities and funding agencies, since we are no longer in social isolation period, they are not doing anything. And that will be a huge setback in all the advancements we had regarding gender and parenthood in science. I just want to tell you a little bit about one of the actions we have done during the pandemic, and it is something that is really close to our hearts, because we took the data from our survey and regarding graduate students, and we decided to do something about it. So in 2020, less than 10% of the graduate students that were mothers said they were able to continue with their theses and dissertations. So we were really, really worried that the pandemic will increase the rate of mothers leaving academia during their graduate courses. And we knew the financial situation was one of the biggest issues they were facing. So we decided to do something. But at the time, the parenting science movement, we didn't have any money to do anything. So we decided to try the crowdfunding. It was the most beautiful experience we had with our movement so far, because in over a month, a little over a month, we were able to raise 120,000 reais. And with that money, we were able to assist 29 mothers. They were grad students. So they start receiving the money in April of 2021. And we pay them this small amount of money each month until they concluded their courses in the end of 2021. Most of the students were helped. They were Black and Indigenous women, and most of them were solo mothers. So yeah, it was a small contribution, it was just 29 students, but it was something we wanted to do to show that these actions, they were needed. We had over 700 applications for the program, and we were able to assist just 29. So it is a huge demand. So the program we call Tomorrow Program, it was featured in Nature again because it was really important, and a lot of actions similar to the Tomorrow Program were being developed in other countries. So they did this editorial about child care crowdfunding and how they help keep moms in science. Parenting science has grown a lot over these 6 years. I just want to introduce to you our ambassadors program because I told you in the beginning that we went from 6 to 90 scientists. And this growth was really important for us to have a national expansion. And because we are talking about a huge country, it's really important that any action that we plan, any study that we have conducted, it made sense for the local reality of our institutions and of our researchers. So the ambassadors, they created local working groups in their institutions, and that way it was really way more easy for us to have institutional changes because they were there, they knew what needed to be changed. So the, the ambassador program was another milestone in our movement because we were able to reach way more institutions and people than we were before. We are also going abroad. So right now we have the Parenting Science Colombia, and we are expanding to other countries in Latin America because they have realities. They are quite similar to ours, but they need to tailor the actions for the realities. So right now in Colombia, they are doing a survey to get data, to gather data and see what's happening with scientists in Colombia. There are parents and everything. So it's been a really interesting experience for us to interact with people from other countries, and we are really glad with this expansion. Just to finish, so what's the future like for us? And one thing I just want to mention is that most of our actions, they are response to demands that are brought to us. So it's the expansion of the parenting science movement was also very definitive for us to see what we need to do regarding actions and everything. So we have a lot of happening right now. As I mentioned before, we cannot discuss gender and parenthood without discussing intersection with these subjects. And I talked a little bit about race, but it is not the only intersection we have with gender and parenthood. We need to address sexuality, and that is mainly because when we're talking of same gender couples, they don't even have the right for leaves and everything. So when we implemented the support policies, usually for professors, is linked to the leave, the period of leave for maternity or paternity leave. And when we are talking about same-sex couples, they don't even have this right. So we need to address this issue if we want to our actions not to be excluded too. Other than that, you saw the data that I showed you, that the impact of having children will persist for like 4 to 5 years, and then women will start to produce again, to publish and everything. But that is quite different when we are talking about parents of children with disability. That drop will persist for a longer period of time or even forever, depending on the condition of the child. So we need to address this issue too, because there are a lot of lack of legislation regarding any rights for parents of people with disability in academia too. The other thing we're trying to address is harassment. As I mentioned before, there is a broad problem of harassment, but there is a lot of problems regarding discrimination against mothers in academia. So we have conducted a survey, the paper is submitted, it should be published soon, about bias in academia regarding parents. And also we have conducted a few courses in our institutions about fighting harassment and discrimination against mothers in science. The other thing is we have been collaborating with people from other parts of the world because there are a lot of good experience we can learn from. So last year we had this call approved by the British Council here in Brazil for a partnership between us at my university, URGS, the Federal University, the Fluminense Federal University, and Oxford Brookes University from the UK. So it was being a really positive interaction for us because they have already a lot of life-work balance policies implemented in the UK. So it was really important for us to learn what can work for us, what couldn't work for us, and adapt all these policies they have developed in there. Just to share some good things also. Last year, the Parenting Science Movement was the winner of the Nature Research Award for Inspiring Women in Science. So Springer Nature, one of the biggest scientific publishers in the world, they have this program, this award for Inspiring Women in Science. And last year we were the winners. This year, another Brazilian initiative was the winner from Tem Menina no Circuito from the Federal University in Rio de Janeiro. So it's really exciting to see a lot of Brazilian initiatives being recognized worldwide for the work we've been doing about gender and women participation in science. So I guess that was I wanted to talk to you about it, and I'm really glad for the opportunity, and just general thanks, because everything we have done, it was mainly because we have a huge support network. People, the entire academic community has come along with us to demand these changes, to help us to reach people that are in charge of making change happen. So we have a lot to thank for these people that have followed us for the last 6 years. We also have to thank the institutions that have helped us with financial support. Serrapilheira is one of the institutions that have helped us a lot, especially in the beginning of the movement. But we also have a partnership with the For Women Science Award from Leal. So I guess this is it.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
I'm so sorry about coughing all the time.
No worries. Thank you, Fernanda. I think we can open now the session for questions. There is one now. And they're clapping for you.
I can't hear.
So.
Oh, there you go. Thanks.
Nicole has a question.
Hi, Fernanda. First,
Hi,
thank you for your seminar. It was really, really, really nice. I think it's a really important topic that we do not discuss as much as we should inside academia. And I already knew the parenting science, and I think I really like what you do and your work and everything. So congratulations and thank you for your and the work of the others that are with you in this project. And I would like to talk it's not actually a question, but also a comment on parenting science. And I don't know, I searched on on Google the translation for creche, so nursery. I don't know if
daycare.
Yes, the daycare, because I don't know in other institutions. I am from Unicamp, and we have there like it's on the side of my department, so I see every day the children there, and I don't know, but maybe we don't fight actually for it, but universities should give, not only universities but the government itself should provide daycare centers public for free for everyone, and universities, like especially universities, should provide this inside the university, not to be so far, and for students, professors, other staff that work there, technicians and everything. So I don't know, because I was talking to some friends last week, And we don't see this in a lot of universities, and actually we don't see this in our city, because all these centers are full, and you don't have space available for everyone, and you have to pay for a babysitter, and we know that not everyone can pay for a babysitter, and we also know that like everything that is like babysitters are mostly other women, black women, and everything. So we are in this cycle of we don't have time to work, and we have to put our children on centers, and we don't have centers for free, so we have to pay, and we have to pay another person to take care, and it's another woman that is taking care of our children in this cycle and cycle. And like having this space for children inside the university, and like not only inside the university, because we know that this is a problem in our society as in general, yes, but we like inside university, I think, like I am a student, I don't have children, but I imagine, like I have a friend that has a children, and I imagine how is like a chaos to have a children being an undergraduate student. Like imagine we have like full class, a full day class, and we have a lot to do. We have exams, we have and sometimes like we have to choose between studying or between taking care of a baby. So it's very hard, and I imagine that even for professors and other students from graduate programs, it's also very hard. And I don't know. I am a daughter of a scientist that passed through a lot during like this. They passed through this, and also a mother of an atypical children. That is my brother. So I think that we have a lot still to fight for, and it's not something that is being like we just say, oh, it's not, we are not producing, and we when we become mothers, we stop doing this and that. But I think it's also good to talk about solutions and what the tomorrow I don't know, program, I don't know how
Program.
what
Program.
yes, it's so important. And I don't know, I want to give my congratulations, because I think it's very, very, very important. And if we had a really supportive, like if the government did this and not an organization, like not inside the government, like if the government really invested into this, I think we would have it would not be perfect, but we would have a really better situation than we have now. And that's it.
Thanks, Nicole. So the daycare situation, it is by far the biggest demand we have for students, both grad and undergrad students, because as you mentioned, there is not enough spots on daycare or preschools or even kindergarten, nurseries from our public system. So our governments, I think it's municipal governments that are responsible for the daycare offering in our city. So there is not enough. So it is for sure the main demand we have. Regarding universities, there are only a handful that have on-site daycares. They are open to students. Some institutions have, they're only for staff, professors, or any kind of administrative staff. So it is a big issue. We have a problem that it requires money. And right now, anything that requires money, we cannot even discuss because we are not heard, and we know how hard it has to be. So there are some alternatives. And for example, here at URGS, we had a daycare, but it was not open for students. It was just for staff. And so they implemented a financial aid, but it's 250 reais. So it does not solve the problem, it's better than nothing, of course. But if you do not have a spot on a public daycare or a nursery, you won't be able to pay with 250 reais. So it's an issue. So it is a demand we have been discussing, and when we meet with the grad and undergrad collectives groups that work with this issue, it's always the main topic we discuss. But it's really hard to solve because, especially for public universities, right now we don't have money for like buying toilet paper, so it's really hard. But again, we should, as a society, to invest more in assisting mothers. And the other thing is that it's something that never, I can't understand why there is this feeling that people, when women become mothers, they have to be penalized. It is quite common of this. You see, like when an undergraduate student have children, they will say, oh, their career is over and everything. People do not accommodate their needs. There is no flexibility on anything. So there is this penalization of women and become mothers. You do not see that for fathers. So it's a social thing and a cultural thing we have. And with that in mind, a lot of people say, oh, there is not an obligation for the government to provide the cares or anything. So it is a cultural change we need. But while this cultural change does not happen, we should be fighting for more support policies, including, especially for our students, daycares and nurseries in our universities. It's never on the top priority, never. And especially right now, but even small things, like if you go to look at your institutions, do you have a changing room, like a changing table in the bathroom or anything? You don't, and that is not a lot of money. But people perceive the university and the institution as a place where moms should not be there. And that's the issue we have.
We have one more question. You're just passing the microphone.
I see.
Hi, Fernanda. Just wanted to say thank you for your presentation. I also, as Nicole, follow the work of Parents in Science, and I think it's really, really nice the work that you do. And also, congratulations for having the parental leave on Lattes. And I think it's nice when you open a curriculum of someone that you are able to see they now have this space to say that they are also mothers and they are scientists. And I just, it's kind of a comment as well, because I was reading the other day about the parental leave and how it's more friendly towards male professors, because they use their time, they are free for doing more work and publishing more, and it has it's kind of the opposite effect when the woman will definitely decrease their publication rates, but it's the opposite for the men. And how can we deal with that with these programs that are trying to kind of equal the parenthood for everyone, but it has this kind of opposite effect? And just a comment in general, I don't see we talking a lot about these women that are not the scientists, but they do a lot of unpaid labor in the house, providing food and cleaning the house and doing all the work that lets these male scientists to be able to do their research. And you see a lot of that sometimes about how these men are telling, oh, I've worked in this problem on this research for years, and I don't know, like the whole day, but you don't acknowledge the work from the people that are doing the background, doing everything that is possible to for these scientists to have the time to do this research. And I just remember an example of a mathematician. He was talking about how he was isolated for, I don't know, more than 5 years just working on something. And when you see he had children, and you think, oh, who was taking care of those children? So I think it's something that we also have to talk about, not only the woman in science, as scientists doing the scientific work, but also who are those women that are making the time for these male scientists to do the research. And thanks again.
Yeah. Sorry, I missed your name.
Cristiana.
Christian. So thanks for the comments. Well, starting with the parental leave. So we do have data, not here in Brazil, but from other countries, analyzed, because in Canada you do have the same period of time for mothers and fathers. It is actual parental leave. You have up to a year, and then you can divide how you want and anything like that. And they show exactly what you said, like when fathers took a leave, they will keep on working and doing other stuff other than taking care of the child. So it is quite tricky. But the thing is, as a society, we cannot accept that we have this different time for leave, considering mothers and fathers. So here in Brazil, we have 4 to 6 months for mothers, and you have 5 to 20 days for fathers. So when the child is born or is adopted, because it's the same period of time, we are saying that the person that should be taking care of the child is the mother, with this kind of different times of leave. And we will not see a cultural change towards caring for children, like it is not just a women's job, if we still don't have the same amount of time for mothers and fathers. It will take time for fathers staying at home and starting to take care of the children when they are home. But we need to have this, at least the same amount of time for mothers and fathers. That's the way we can drive a change when people will stay at home and see what's the reality. Because if a man get like 5 days, if they leave the hospital with the child and he's back at work, so he's not familiar with the routine, how it is to take care of someone. So it is mandatory that we change our parental leaves here in Brazil. It actually is mandatory. We have a parental leave, not maternity and paternity leaves. We have a parental leave, so people can decide what is the best arrangement for that family. We're talking about a solo mom that can take up to a year, or a heterosexual couple that have a mother and a father. They can split and have 4 and 10. I don't know. So we need the parental leave. And the main reason for that we mostly don't discuss is that we are talking about being the maternity leave be a right for the women. We should be discussing that the parental leave, it's a child's right. That child needs to be taken care of. Who is taking care of the child? If it's the mom, the father, whoever, it has to have the right to be away from work and have the conditions to take care of. So it is not the solution, the only solution. Like, if we have extended paternity leave or the parental leave, we will solve all the problems of women having a heavier burden taken care of. That's not going to be right away, but it's the way we have to drive this change. And I think it's already happening. There is some data indicating that this new generation, even my generation, I'm a little bit older than you, but even my generation, we already see men engaged in caring and doing stuff. So it's going to happen, but it will be way faster if we allowed fathers to stay home longer and taking care of children. So it is a main thing. Right now, there is one, how do you say, projeto de lei? law project. I'm not sure if that's a true literal translation, but there are some projects that propose the parental leave or even extending the paternity leave. But we still live in a quite sexist society. So a lot of these projects don't move along in our legislative houses and everything because they don't see a priority. Why there was one a deputado, I'm not sure how to say that in English. He said, well, what will a man be doing at home for a month? It was not even 6 months. They were talking about extending the paternity leave for a month. And he said, no, there's nothing a man can do in there. So it's hard, but it's mandatory. We need to change that. And the other thing about the unpaid work, I think we need to start acknowledging privileges, and that is quite hard. So the academic system was built for men that had someone at home taking care of it. Because if you look at the numbers, who can work 80 hours a week? Only someone that has somebody else taking care of everything else in their lives, because you cannot work 80 hours a week and then take care at home. I'm not even bring child to this discussion. You cannot take care of your home, your house, if you work 80 hours a week. So the academic system was built around that. And it's quite hard for people to acknowledge that they were able to get what they got because they had privileges, including someone taking care of their lives. So it is something we need to be discussing more, that the way we built our academic career, the ideals we have of what it is a successful scientist or professor or anything. And we need to be discussing that. And because there is no balance in our system. You should be just devoted to your career. That's how the academic system was built. And we need to change that. Not only because we are talking about parenthood, but also because we should be discussing mental health. We have a lot of mental health issues in academia. They are derived from this, oh, you have to work 60, 80 hours a week. If you are not doing that, you are not devoted, you are not good enough. If you need a break for any reason, oh, you are not committed to your work and everything. And that has a huge impact on mental health. And we are seeing that. We have really terrible numbers when we look at mental health in academia. So we need to change that. And that is a discussion that is starting to happen, but it should be more common to talk about these issues.
Thank you, Fernanda, for the answers.
You're welcome, Christina.
Does anybody have any other questions, comments? Oh, we have here.
Hi, Fernanda.
Hi.
I am Kawe. You talked about, I think, what I would call a reproductive labor, which is something which isn't technology in general. But you also mentioned the broader idea that there is the labor of caring, of taking care, more than just the care which is related to reproduction. And one example which I think of very much because of my family history is the taking care of elderly. Because I have in my family a history of Alzheimer's disease and related subject. Is there such a similar initiative in the case of, because I see, for example, my father and my aunt who took care of my grandpa and my grandmother for, I think, the last 10 years in succession. And if they were scientists, they would not be able to continue their careers. My aunt had already developed her career in the private research, so she was able to retire in a way because she had saved money, and so that she can take care. My father also, because he's a psychologist, so he can arrange his time. But if any of them were a scientist, they would not be able to help. And I see, and I, even if I for example was in my original in my state of origin, I would be I would feel the need and the incline of helping, and since I was in another state, they were always saying to me, no, Kawe, you shouldn't worry about that. We are taking care here. But my sister, my other cousins, which were back in my home state, they were taking care of this. So if it would be, that is something important, I think, that should be in people's curricula. I think, for example, in the professorship stage in which you are, the age of your parents is probably much higher, so that turn of events can go more probably. And also, if you could comment on adoption and such other family arrangements, which probably also impact a lot on, because even though you do not have to recover possibly from a surgery or be organically laboring to take care of that child through lactation and the like, you probably, I imagine, there are many other issues that you should take care of and which also require an extensive time destination. So if you could comment on those other issues besides them not being the most, what I think, fundamental issue, which is that of mothers, since mothers and maternity leave, because I think that would be statistically the most important, but also those others.
Thanks, Kawe. So those two are very important points. I do not know any initiative or organization that discusses care as the way as we do with parenthood. So I'm not aware of, doesn't mean it doesn't exist, it's just not aware of. But even with the parenting science movement, if you look at one of the last papers we published, in the title, we didn't talk about parenthood, we talk about care, because we know it's way broader than just caring for children. So it is a really small discussion that is just on the beginning about taking care of elderly. That does affect women more than men, as we already know, because, well, again, caring is seen as something women should do. So, but there is a lot of impact. I'm pretty sure of that. I'm not, as you mentioned, I'm not on my hometown. So my dad now is almost 80. He's getting old and everything. And my sister is taking care of him because I'm not there. And that for sure would also impact my career. There is no doubt about it. So it is something we should be addressing. The last meeting we had with CNPq regarding the adding the leave tab on the platform, they said there are a lot of other requests of the leave be more broad, the tab on the LATS platform be more broad, to include any pause in our careers. It could be medical licenses, it could be a lot of things. And I think when we start to see that, we're already seeing this discussion happening because of the motherhood, the maternity leave in there. But I think when we start to normalize pauses in our career, we will include in these discussions all the caring we have to do and all the time-consuming activities we have to perform in our lives outside academia. And that is because so far, until very recently, people say that, oh, it's your personal life, there is nothing to be discussed about, there's nothing we can do about it, it isn't important what is happening in your personal life. And that has been broken a little bit because we started discussing parenthood, and there is no way to separate your personal and your professional life. So I think with the discussion we started regarding parenthood and all the discussions that are coming along, we will be able to have some changes. Regarding any other personal life moments we'll go through in our lives and how that will impact our careers, and we should be aware of that. But again, there isn't many organized discussions, at least not that I've seen, and I think we should be bringing this discussion. There are a lot of things happening in the world in these discussions. I just saw a paper of something I've never thought about, even being a woman. It was about menopause in the scientific career, how that changes the women go through and the period of their life. It will also impact, because it will have a lot of health impacts and everything. So I think worldwide, there are a lot of discussion there starting to rise about how our personal life will impact our professional life, and how, if we want to be diverse, to have excellence in academia or anywhere, we should be taking care of these issues. Regarding adoption, for us, when we talk about parenthood, we do not separate both. Like when we are talking about all the data we have the numbers for people who adopted children as well in the mix. We were never able to do a study just with adopters because it's a really small number we had in our database. We could not have like a specific number showing, oh, the impact for someone that adopted a child is smaller or bigger for someone that birthed a child. But many of the initiatives, when you look at the calls from the funding agencies, they will say leave in consequence of birth or adoption. So it is included, not all. So a few things have to change, but a lot of the initiatives they do include. They do not differentiate between birthing or adopting a child. But that is usually works for heterosexual couples. We do have to be aware of what happens when we have same-sex couples, because in both situations, even birthing or adopting a child, we were implicating one of them having the right to leave. For instance, we had a lot of cases of women's couples. One of the woman is pregnant, and then she's the one that has the leave. The other has no right whatsoever, but it doesn't mean that she's not taking care of the children or anything. So it has an impact on their career, and they cannot even add in the Deluxe platform because they do not have leaves. So both adoptions and the situation of same-sex couples, they need to be looked at with more detail. Here at University, at URGS, last year, the legislation about hiring professors, our concursos, I do not have an idea how to say that in English. So the new legislations for the concursos included the maternity clause. So for people that are applying for the job and had children for the last 6 years, there will be a correction factor in the grade they have, on the score they have for the CV analysis. And the university has installed a special committee, I'm part of it, to discuss, okay, so we are talking about women that had a 6-month leave, but what happens if we have someone that adopted, they have a 4 months leave and everything. So I think the institutions are aware of these nuances when we are talking about implementing support policies. So I guess we need more data. That's the first thing. We do not have specific data, but we always consider that when we are developing the policies.
Thank you for your answer. It was very clarifying. I didn't know, for example, that adoption was already considered in those in the funding by the funding agencies and the like.
Not all, but in some. One problem we had was with CNPq, because if you go into the leave tab, there is only the option of maternity leave. And even though women could put in there if they adopted someone, legally, it's a different term. They have adopters leave, not maternity leave. So we requested that it will be more flexible, like maternity/adopter leave. So, but it hasn't changed yet because it's not easy to change anything with them, but it should be more clear that we are including, when we're talking about mothers in science, we are including everyone, regardless of birthing or adopting a child.
Thank you.
Hi, Fernanda. Thank you again for your lecture. It was really, I think, really important to hear you say what you choose to bring. And my first question was a bit about you tackled while answering Kawe about same-sex marriages and how the legislation handles the children from mothers and both fathers. And my second question, I don't know if it's a question, but, and I don't want to be redundant, but with what you told us, but I was wondering, you already showed us some programs and some support networks, but what kind of tips do you have to give for someone that is planning to be a mother and to remain in academia? You showed us the networks and all, but maybe where to look for help and what we could do to make this process a little bit less harsh and difficult. Yes.
Okay, so sorry, I didn't get your name.
Isabel.
So Isabel, I guess the main thing is, and I just want to make it clear, the motherhood is not a problem at all. The problem is the system we are within. So that being said, we know there are a lot of impacts, and that will even affect your decision of becoming a mother. So we have a lot of data from scientists. For instance, here in Brazil, the average age for women to have children in academia is 32 years old. That is a lot higher than for the general society. So this fear of having this impact in your career will even influence when and if you become a mother. So I guess there isn't like, I guess what we need to do to make it easier is, first of all, to get to know our rights. A lot of people do not know what you have rights about. Like students here in my university at UFRGS, for instance, undergrad students, they can register their dependents, and you can use that, like you have to take your child to the doctor, you can use that to like justify your absence in class. And when I tell this to students, a lot of them have no idea. So if you are an undergraduate student, a professor, and you decided to have a child, or you are having a child, in either way, go and check for information. It is not easy to find, and that is something we've been working in the institutions. You have to have the information available. You cannot expect someone to waste like a week trying to find how to register your leave when you are a grad student. So again, I talk about a lot about UFRGS because it's where I am. So we have now a new legislation for graduate programs, and in there it is a protocol how to register your leave. So we've been working with institutions because usually there is nothing very public. So that's my first thing I would recommend someone in your institution that you are when you are becoming a mom. What is the things that are available? They do have daycare, they pay, they have a financial aid for it. Do you have the right? I'm not sure if you are an undergrad or grad student, but unfortunately, here in Brazil, we do not have a law that guarantees leave for students. So it all depends on the institution. So does your institution have on their legislation and their regulation maternity leave for undergraduate students? Go after this information because that will make things a lot easier. And the other thing is, I'm a quite positive person, so I think it's becoming easier. It's not easy. I'm not gonna say it is easy. It's easy because it isn't. We still have a lot of obstacles and a lot of things to change, but I think we are facing a more positive future. So I guess for future mothers, there will be somehow easier way because we are discussing it, because you are bringing change in legislations and rules and everything. But I guess my main advice would be to look for information when you decide or you're having a child, because that will make things a lot easier. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy to find information and everything, but I guess that's what I would suggest. And we are trying to work with our institutions to provide this information in a more useful way and everything.
Thank you so much.
I think we have a time for one last question or comments out there.
Hi, Fernanda, and thank you for the talk. My name is Ruth. I'm from Mexico, so I'm going to comment about, well, referring to Mexico or the situation in there. But I think that one of the one of the reasons that the people leave academy when they become parents is because in our industry, you can be more confident to have health insurance, for example, for your children. And in academy, well, at least in Mexico, it's not possible. Maybe we can apply for a support like the you mentioned, but it's just for the birth of baby and or the first months. But the rest of the PhD or postdocs, you have to live with your scholarship, and you can apply for other supports. So I think one of the things that we have to improve or to ask for is that kind of things, for example.
That is for sure. That's a really good point, Ruth. Thanks. Because, and I guess it's what happened here too, because our students, graduate students, they do not have any kind of, not sure how you say that. It's not right in any way, but you don't have any support regarding health insurance or anything. There is not how it is in here, because you're not an employee of the university, so you don't have any kind of rights regarding that. And our students, they are not seen as they are seen as a student, as a grad student here in Brazil. So there aren't any rights. There are targeting our graduate student. That is for sure one of the biggest issue we have. When we were doing a study on graduate students, their parents, it was quite striking for us that most of the students that were parents, they were not fellowship holders. And that's because it's quite simple. Why? Because you cannot support a child receiving 1,000 reais or 2,000 as a PhD student. So they end up going away and trying to find a job. They can manage both things, grad student, being a grad school, and having a job. But that was quite clear. We had like 10,000 students that participated in this study, and it was really high the number of parents that were not fellowship holders because they could not provide to their child with the fellowships we have. So that is for sure one of the biggest issues that we have when we are talking about students in general. And again, that goes back to the way that who were the graduate students not so long ago. Because again, we are talking about people with privilege. They do not have to worry about money because they had money. So when we started with all the affirmative actions in our universities and getting people from different backgrounds entering the universities, it was really positive. But we did not think it through how we would sustain these students, maintain these students in the universities and grad school, because the financial situation, it is for sure one of the main reasons people will be abandoning academia, especially if you are a parent. You cannot almost support yourself with a fellowship, let alone support somebody else. So it is for sure something we need to be discussing.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Laura.
Yeah, so I guess we reached the end of this session. But Fernanda, on behalf of the Serrapilheira team, Hugo, Chris, Camila, would like to thank you so much for taking your time, your busy agenda to discuss this important topic with everyone. I guess they enjoyed a lot. There were lots of questions, and hope to see you in the near future. And we thank you so much for taking your time to be here with us.
Thanks, Natalia. It's always a pleasure.
They are clapping for you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
See
Bye.
you. Bye. See you.